All right. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Welcome to our first December installment of Redpoint Office Hours. We are very excited for this conversation. This, I think, has been the highest registration number that we've had for an office hours this year with a conversation between Tomasz and Linda. I'm Travis Bryant. I lead our founder experience program at Redpoint and really thrilled to have all of you join. I just want to do, since for many of you that this might be the first chance using our AirMeet technology for a virtual meeting, just want to point out a couple of quick features for you. Some of you already taken advantage of the emoji responses. And so if you want to give a little shout out to our speakers, I don't think that was funny, but that looks like there's some laughs there. So that's one thing you can use to share. Please chat away. There's a full global chat where you can add, and you can see there's a few notes there, but there's also direct chat one-on-one if you want to send a message to a fellow attendee. If you do have a specific question for Tomaszs or Linda, please use the questions component rather than just the global chat. And we can use that to prioritize the questions that we'll ask. We'll weave those throughout the conversation. We don't record these. These are off the record kind of conversations for the community, but we do post a summary of the key findings to Tomasz's blog afterwards. So don't worry about having to scribble down notes and just enjoy the conversation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tomasz to introduce Linda and jump in.
Awesome. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, everybody. So my name is Tomasz Tunguz. I'm a managing director at Redpoint Ventures. Welcome to SaaS Office Hours. This is a program where we invite luminaries from the SaaS world to come and share their insights and their history. We've done them for about 3 years, and we started to do them online earlier this year, and they've been a huge success. And this one is the hugest success so far. So thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
We've gathered questions from the audience and we've collected them, and so we're going to walk through them. But if you've got questions, as Travis said, please do ask them in the questions window. We'll be monitoring that. And I want to thank Travis, Ashley, and Grace from the Redpoint team for putting all this together. And I also today have the great pleasure of welcoming Linda. Linda and I have known each other for a while from our first days at Google. And Linda has gone on to have this ridiculous career where she's done a number of incredible things. And we reconnected recently. And Linda was telling me about some of her journeys and some of her insights about management and how to run large companies and small companies. And I had this in the back of my mind. I was like, how do I get Linda on SaaS Office Hours? I got to get her to say yes. And so I popped the question, and thankfully she said yes. And so we're here. So Linda, thank you so much for joining us. It's so exciting.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. And it's been so fun talking with you as we've been reconnecting. And so thank you for letting me join this and engage with all the folks within the Redpoint community.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it off. So tell us about, your early days at Google. What were they like? What were some of the memories? Where were you coming from, and sort of what happened?
Oh yeah, I mean, Google was awesome. I loved it there. I mean, this was back in like 2007 when, food was free flowing, the gyms were like kind of there, and, shuttle buses were like the new thing. But Google was super fun because it was this amazing organization that you could like move fast, and we were shipping products. I got to work on Google Chrome. That was my first project. And when I worked on that launch, we launched to hundreds of millions of people. Like, imagine being this like young kid, a year out of college, and being able to launch Google Chrome to the world. I can't believe they trusted me with that. There were some fools there. I don't know what they were thinking. But that was such a cool experience. And then I got to move on to launch Android, which was another really massive launch and really great experience. But yeah, it was such a cool place to be at that time.
That's awesome. One of the things that we would talk a lot about during that time was startup ideas, right? And we always sort of had this itch, and the way that I think about Google now, I wonder why we had this itch, but we always had this itch of starting companies. And after Google, you branched out into the startup world. Walk us through that. Why was it that you decided to branch out, and which companies did you go to, and what did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was really cool about Google was everyone around us made us feel like we could do anything and everything we wanted to. We could change the world, and we could be the CEOs of companies, and we could start and disrupt parts of the industry. And, being part of Android exposed me to this new mobile space that was evolving and growing and emerging. And I saw so much opportunity there. I felt like, one, mobile applications were the future. Two, the way that people were engaging on mobile had yet to be defined, and I had a lot of ideas around it. And the startup, TapJoy, that happened to be started by a fellow Googler, also within our APMM class, Ben Lewis, had reached out and said, "Hey, come run product at my startup." And so the combination of being able to work in the mobile space and help advance that, and go to a small, I mean, at that point it was 3 people, but go to a small, tiny startup to go do that was incredible. And I mean, come on, like in 2007, the idea of building a startup was the sexiest thing, in the world. Like the idea of, like, you would go to any coffee shop and people would say, "Oh my gosh, like I got, seed funding, and I've got this cool idea that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar company in so many years." And so it was kind of the thing to do.
It was amazing. And I remember you were the center of the world for mobile. Like if you wanted to know what was going on in the world of mobile, you had to talk to Linda. You knew all the developers. Like I remember having some conversations with you back then because I was like, she's the center of the world. And from there, then you made another leap, right? You went to another startup and then to the NFL. So walk us through that.
Yeah. So TapJoy was wildly successful, right? We grew from like, about 3 people to close to around like 300, 350 people by the time I left. And it was just this wild ride, right? We scaled this company to millions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And it happened so fast. It happened in about 2 years, which is crazy. Like that's like the true definition of a hockey stick curve. And when we got there, I felt like I lost touch with building product on a day-to-day basis, because I went there to go build product, and suddenly I was elevated to this chief product officer role, and I was, running the entire product engineering teams at that point. And so I left and, reconnected with a bunch of Android friends from Google who had left, who wanted to push the needle on Android, because we always had this vision when we were at Google around how operating systems would evolve and how the next generation of the OS really needed to be a cloud OS, and everything about your applications, the state of those applications, all of your personalization should live in the cloud, and devices should just be these sort of mechanisms that you interact with that pull that information down. And so I joined the startup Nextbit, which was had this belief to build that cloud operating system and the first device to actually host that cloud operating system, and we sold it direct to consumer. So I jumped to Nextbit at that point. We were about, I think I was the 5th employee. So I love like small teams and building things from scratch, and had a blast there. And we executed for a couple of years, and I probably would have stayed in that space forever, except one day I got this phone call from this woman who said, "Hey, Tom Brady wants to talk to you." And
no way.
If you know me, I'm like this huge sports nut. Like I love sports and I love football. And she was headhunting me from the NFL, and said they were looking for somebody who loves sports and could build product. And they wanted someone to come in and build their digital product suite. And so I took the call, and she was right. There was a Tom Brady who wanted to talk to me. Little did I know, it wasn't Tom Brady from the Patriots, or I guess now the Buccaneers, but there's actually a gentleman named Tom Brady who ran all of social media for the NFL, as well as, a whole host of other characters that I got to meet with. But I went down to LA and got to know all these amazing people at the league, and ended up moving down there to go run product for the NFL, which was this unreal experience. I mean, if you're a football fan, there's probably no better place to be.
That's crazy. Tom Brady must have been the single best social media manager of all time.
Oh my gosh. I will share this one thing about him that was super cool. It was whenever we had to travel for a game or for the Super Bowl or for something like that, we'd show up to the hotel and he would go to check in, and you'd see this line of people waiting where they'd be like, "Oh my God, Tom Brady's coming." Because, his card was tom.brady@nfl.com. And so he'd show up and he would check in, and people would be like, "We upgraded you to the presidential suite, sir." And it's just because how many people think that there's going to be another Tom Brady at the NFL? But it was this super cool experience, and he was such a cool dude. It was really great.
That's awesome. But okay, so big company, really small company, really small company, really big company, sort of an unusual path, right?
Oh yeah.
And then well, tell us a little bit about the NFL, and then let's go to AppDynamics and let's bring it all together.
Yeah, sure. So the NFL was amazing. And it was also my first experience at a non-tech company. The NFL through and through, it's a licensing association that is more or less a media company. And so it's not about the technology that makes you win that space. It's about the content. It's the game. It's the players. It's the competition you see on the field. And the products that I was building were ways to just distribute that content to the masses. And for the first time in my life, I was at a company where the things that I was building, like the products I built, were not the most important part of that company's success, which is super unique. I mean, like, color me like just totally ignorant, but having been in tech, you always go into a company thinking like product wins. Product is the thing that you need to build that moves your company forward. And for the first time, I realized I was part of the support mechanism of how do I get the content, the most important part of the business, out to the masses. And so that was a really, really unique experience. And, with it, one of the biggest things I had to figure out was if I deliver that content, right, streaming games, it gets really complex. For any of you who build video streaming platforms or are familiar with it, it's really easy for things to break. And it's really easy for your product and your platform to just go haywire and have hundreds of millions of fans hate you and hate your guts because their fantasy platform is down or they can't stream the game that they're watching. And that's how I discovered AppDynamics, because we were using AppDynamics to manage our performance. And when we had outages, we leveraged AppDynamics to figure out what went wrong, to fix them in real time, and ultimately deliver these great experiences. And so I spent a couple of years at the NFL, built these products and these experiences for our fans, and then saw this opportunity with AppD and ended up moving over to AppDynamics and moving back to the Bay Area to go build out a performance monitoring platform, which, is so obvious.
For sure. And now you're the GM of that business unit, which basically means you're the CEO of that entire business, which is a multi-billion-dollar business that Cisco acquired.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. 3 years ago when I joined to run their innovation lab. I had this theory around how you could build cultures of innovation within large organizations, that culture could be the center of how you disrupt yourself and ensure that as a company, you're continuing to grow and innovate and stay ahead of the game. And so I came in to build that. And as I built it, I found all these opportunities within the organization to bring people together and to build great teams and to make our product best in class. And so I slowly expanded my role from running the innovation lab to then running our experience team, like our design and experience team, and documentation, front-end engineering, product management, program management. And before I knew it, they were like, hey, you should be our chief product officer. And then about 4 months ago, they're like, actually, why don't you just be the general manager? So it was a really exciting evolution, to say the least.
That's amazing. What a run. So, I mean, congratulations. It's just out of control.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I really love about your background is started with a big company in hypergrowth, then go to a startup, experience hypergrowth from the very early stages, then go to another company again, like, super young. Then you go into like a big media company where technology is not prioritized and engineering is viewed as a cost center. And then you go back into and now you're basically the CEO of a $100 million a year business. What is, one of the things that you said to me in our recent conversations is you really preferred the bigger company. And that's surprising. Like, it's not something that you hear from a lot of people. And it's one of those like things you hear in the Bay Area, like when you were talking about the Google experience, like everybody's like, oh, I'm going to go and be a startup founder. I want to be at the very early stages. What is it about the bigger company that you love so much? And how did you, from those days in Google when we were talking about going to startups, how did your opinion change?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of startups is the idea that you can bottle up your passion and you can go build a business and you could move fast and you can break things, and it's just really sexy. And the idea is like you take this risk, and if it hits, it's great, and if it doesn't, you just try again. And that's what made me leave Google to try TapJoy, right? That's what, like, it got me so excited on the startup bus. But then once I saw TapJoy scale and get to the size of what was more or less a growth business that needed to mature, I realized that it's not about just building product. Like, when you get to that level of growth, someone else is building product. You're part of a business that has a product, but like, you're no longer building product, you're building teams. And when you get to the stage where you're building teams and bringing people together, suddenly you're in a position of, one, great impact, but two, the complexity gets that much more like hairy. Products, like, you just find product market fit. And I'm not, trying to like downplay how difficult it is to be a startup founder and to find product market fit, but there are so many tools and systems out there to help you, and there are so many formulas and accelerators that can, support you as you make these iterations. But building teams means every single time you add a person to it or remove a person, you change the dynamics. Every single time you start to work cross-functionally, you have to build empathy and understanding. And it's, I fell in love with the idea of building teams and organizations because I realized that, one, I'm a little bit masochistic and I love just like creating pain for myself. But it was also just amazing because when you're successful, you really have this opportunity to have a massive impact, not just on the business, but all the individuals within your organization. And there's something that's just so gratifying about being able to bring people together to do something bigger, not just for a company, but for all the people who are part of that company. You make an impact on their lives, the community around you, and the business that you're a part of. And, it takes a lot longer to realize those wins, but there's something that's changed within me that went from caring about just building products for the sake of building great products for this world to wanting to build teams and organizations that have this long-term sustainability.
That's awesome. So that skill, those soft skills about learning to build a management team are so hard, right? It's like, you can go through manager training, like, we had in the APM program, like, management coaches, and give all these kinds of frameworks. But having those conversations and managing people is actually really, how did you get amazing at it? How did you become so good?
I started by sucking. I remember the first time I started managing people, I didn't know anything about it. And so I just thought, if I'm really good at my job, if I'm the best PM, then all the PMs I manage, I can teach them to be really good at it too. And I was pretty much your standard first-time manager that didn't know anything about it and just assumed that I would just tell people what to do, and that's all management was. And I micromanaged and I burned people out. But then what I found was, it was actually when I started managing non-PMs, so people who didn't have my skill set, or rather had a skill set that I didn't possess. I didn't know how to help them because suddenly I'm not an engineer. Like, I don't have a CS degree. I'm not going to help you with, QAing your code or figuring out the best process. And what I found was at that point, I suddenly had to act differently. I had to ask questions, see how I could unblock people, support people, listen to them, empathize with them, and find ways to help them grow in their journey. And as I did that, I got this feedback where they're like, oh my gosh, like, you're not a shitty manager. Like, for the first time, I started to get this really positive feedback. And with that, I realized that management is less about being really good at something and sort of passing down those skills. And it's more about empowering the people. And it's a level of service level leadership where the people under you don't need you to tell them how to do their job. They need you to empower them and support them and build an ecosystem around them so they can grow. And you're successful when they're successful. And when they fail, it's your failure. And when you get that in your head, it starts to help you see more clearly what it means to be a manager and then how to be a good manager.
Yeah. That's fascinating. And do you just practice and practice and practice, or were there other sort of techniques or people who kind of guided you along the way?
A lot of books, a lot of, I would say one of my sneaky talents, like probably the one thing that I would say I do really well is I identify talent really well and I hire really great people around me. And what I've done is I've been able to hire people who are infinitely better than me at everything they do. And they are willing to come work with me. I don't know why, but they come work with me and I put them in these positions where I get to observe them and I get to learn from them. And I see, even in AppDynamics right now, this person, Rachel, they're a incredible design leader, one of the best design leaders I've ever worked with. And I constantly learn from them every single day. And, Rachel teaches me about what it means to be an empathetic leader and what it means to be a great design thinker and how to build great teams and how to build a great culture. And as long as I continuously find great people to surround myself with and learn from them, I put myself in a position of growth. And it's, very little have I learned from myself. I've learned a little bit, but I really learn from others that are around me. And that's my one way of leveraging my sneaky power.
That's awesome. That's really cool. One of the things that we also talked about in our conversation was the idea of culture. And the way that I think about culture is, Linda, as the general manager of AppDynamics, you're not going to be in every room. You're not going to be in every conversation. And when we were at Google, Eric Schmidt really talked about like follow the prioritize the user and everything else will follow. And that's the way that he was in literally every room, right? We would make product and marketing decisions based on that. Is that an accurate assessment of culture? Do you think about it differently? And how has it changed with COVID and with DEI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, culture at a company is really, it's a reflection of how people act and make decisions and ultimately drive their work and the business forward. And like Google is very much a product driven culture. I think right now, especially AppDynamics and at businesses that I'm part of, like I've seen this big shift. There's this idea that you're not just at a company to build products or move the business forward, but rather, you're there to go do something bigger than yourself. And I see the need to think about diversity and about team building and how do you shift from a, me first, performance first culture to a we first culture. And it's we succeed as a team, we fail as a team, and you can't have individual success without group success. And it's this really fascinating transformation because it's one, I think with COVID, suddenly the idea of how we work together and collaborate has been that much more sort of like put under a magnifying glass because we're distributed and we're all in our homes and we have to find ways to work together where we don't have like physical proximity to help us. And then the second part of it is how we communicate and lean on each other and trust each other. And that's really emphasized the need of strong teams, strong communication, and strong culture in the fabric of how your company operates. And it's so critical. Like I feel like if there's anything to focus on right now, it's probably around your team and like enforcing a really strong culture.
So one of the single most common topic that kicks off every board meeting of startups that I work with is how are other companies managing teams in COVID well, getting them to engage on video? Can you even sustain the culture? Can you build relationships? Can you onboard people who are brand new? Like, are there any things that you're doing inside of AppD that have really worked?
I would say, I don't think we've unlocked like a trick yet. Like we haven't I would say we're not there yet, but we've tried a bunch of things. And what I've noticed throughout this period is it's this need to constantly evolve because the things that you've tried may work temporarily, and then you have to go keep trying other things. And, at the beginning of COVID, one of our biggest challenges was we had just begun hiring a ton of people. So we had a ton of people onboarding into the business. And when you're in a distributed environment, it's really, really hard to even meet new people. And so one of the things we did was every other Friday, we did Aloha Fridays. So we were saying hello to new team members and we're saying farewell to anyone who was leaving, but we use it as an opportunity to meet people and play games and chill out as we were sort of sunsetting the Friday or sunsetting that week. And it worked for a period of time, but then, at some point it becomes so routine and so monotonous that you have to shake things up and find new ways to change things around. And so we're constantly trying new ideas to bring our teams together and to keep people engaged. One of the areas that I haven't quite figured out yet that actually I would love some suggestions in the live chat if you have them is how do you deal with this like video drain? It like sitting in front of a camera all day is so exhausting. And, I think at the beginning of COVID, people were actually crushing it. We saw really high productivity. But then, through the summer and as we got into the fall, I saw productivity drop and I saw fatigue really set in our organization. And so we've been testing different things. Like we recently implemented a no meeting Wednesday on the first Wednesday of every month, just to give people that heads down time. And it's been massively successful. So we're looking at extending it. But, I'm trying to find ways that we can start to address this fatigue that's coming, because I think we're on this dynamic curve, and I think we need to continually test out new ideas of how we evolve our culture and how we evolve our ways of working in this new environment.
One of the things that before COVID happened, the distributed companies, what I noticed about them is they were far more written. Like they would just document stuff a lot, and so there were onboarding guides. And has your team your business unit moved in that direction at all, or are you kind of trying to keep the face-to-face with this Zoom fatigue?
We've definitely gotten infinitely better at documentation. It's what's interesting is as we moved into COVID, we also had some of our teams sort of spread out into, whether people moved home with their parents or they moved across the country, or maybe they decided to, go totally remote into another country, we're dealing not just with the fact that we're all on video and no longer physically present anymore, but also spread across time zones. So the ability to meet becomes a bit more challenging. And so we are leaning a lot more on documentation and communicating over, Slack or WebEx Teams, and, writing full specs and iterating on Confluence pages together. And so that is one area that we're working on, but I would say there's still room for improvement there. Like reading long documents is a tough way to get alignment.
Totally. Awesome. Okay, now let's shift into the audience questions. And so these are going to be sort of less thematic. I'm just going to hop from one to the next. And if anybody in the audience has a question to interject in the meantime, please shoot them over. The first one is, what OKR, do you use OKRs, which we had at Google, or other goal setting mechanisms to manage at scale? How do you align a team?
So we've actually been working on OKRs recently. We previously had sort of just individualized team goals. What I found, and when I talk to other people about how they roll out these different frameworks or tools for goal setting, is people have all this feedback on whether OKRs are right, whether Google did the right thing with OKRs, or whether you should be using some other mechanism to track all these centralized metrics and goals for your organization. And as we spent time rolling that out and getting our organization bought in, I found the biggest friction is not the tool and it's not the mechanism that you're using. It's about making sure that before you try and roll that out, making sure the whole organization's aligned. Is everyone pointing at the same North Star? If they are, then rolling out these tools and these systems is incredibly easy. If they aren't, then a lot of people blame OKRs, or they blame the goal setting tools or whatever performance management system they're leveraging. And so what I found is, as we've been rolling this out, it's been more important for us to get really clear about our mission and the top level goals for the company, and to repeat them as much as necessary before actually going down into like the actual tools and execution side of it.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Question from the audience. Brock asks, what are your plans for a virtual holiday party for the division?
We actually, so we do have a virtual holiday party planned. We are hopping on like this cool event-based call, and we have like different activities that we're going to be streaming. We also, in addition to the holiday party, recently we actually have a large population of our organization in India. So we did a Diwali celebration, and it was amazing. We had a musician, and we had people talk about what Diwali means for them. We had people sharing videos and like photos and pictures of food. And so, for each of these different moments in life that are happening across the world that our teams are, wanting to celebrate, we're trying to find ways to not only like get people together and have some sort of entertainment and excitement, but also, give our organization and people within a chance to speak and talk about the importance and share some sort of like personal perspective on each of these holidays. And it's helping us bring people together and just get more visibility of the team.
Awesome. Great answer. Okay, I got a question in the chat from Connor, which also popped up in the audience, which was, how do you build your team? What do you look for in managers? How do you find great candidates?
So I'll break that apart. So building my team, great managers, and then candidates. I'll start with the candidates, and then managers, and then the team. So with great candidates, I look for people who are curious. Like that's like the number one thing. Like you can check capabilities and skill sets and things like that, usually through resumes and high level conversations. And you can usually ensure that someone meets like a minimum bar from being able to do the job. But then I look for curiosity and a growth mindset, because if you have that, then potential becomes limitless. And once you find a person who's naturally curious and has a growth mindset, whatever role you put them in, they're going to crush it. And when I look at that for someone who's in management, so shifting to managers, I not only want someone with that growth mindset, but I want someone who recognizes the need that their success is not theirs, it's their team's. So they not only need to have a growth mindset themselves, but they also have to recognize the importance of growing the people in their organization and growing the individuals within their team, as opposed to looking at personal individual success. Because on a management level, your job is not to, be the best or be the sort of be the expert. It's about being the person that empowers others. And, a lot of times great managers, one of the best characteristics is someone who hires people that are better than themselves. And there's like this fear of hiring someone who's got more experience and more talent than you, because what if they take your job? But what I found is when you surround yourself with people who are really great, it continually up levels the organization, and you learn so much from them that, it sounds scary, but it's actually been really fabulous for my career, at least. And so I encourage managers to look for people that they find better than them and more skilled than them that they can learn from. And then when I think about teams, I look for amazing people, but teams to me have to be around a dynamic. You have to shape a team with all the people on it, as opposed to sort of like fill individual roles, because having the right chemistry between people, having a diverse perspective, having people from different backgrounds, different skill sets, different types of experiences allows you to create this dynamic where you have healthy conflict, but you have people who will push you towards optimal outcomes. You need people who are going to think differently about how to solve problems and bring unique perspectives. So I look for that in the makeup of my team. And then I also try to balance it with regards to functional areas of expertise, personality types, and then ultimately, the one thing that I look for in common for everyone on my team is the ability to look beyond themselves and think about how do we win together. So
that's awesome. Okay, there's a related question, which is, what role does HR play on your team? Like, do you have a great HRBP who's helping you kind of think about these team dynamics and some of the team management stuff you just talked about?
Totally. I'm super lucky. My HRBP on my current leadership team is one of the best folks I've ever worked with in my life, like hands down. This guy is he pushes me, and he's brilliant. And I think historically when I've worked with organizations, a lot of people look at HR as sort of this, as this group that helps you check boxes and like prevents you from doing things that are totally illegal or wrong or whatever for the business. And they see it as like a road bump, right? But this guy has really shown me how you can leverage HR to move your business forward and like really bring people together and drive success and performance. He's opened my eyes to how to think differently about things like span of control, how to think differently about setting career paths for people on your team. How do you more effectively do succession planning? How do you think about like structuring rewards and bonuses and setting up people for long-term sort of financial success? How do you he's met with every individual on my team and their direct, so all my skip levels, to better understand the dynamics and come back and help me identify areas where I need to provide coaching and power of team support to all the teams within my organization. Like he's really become this guy who's helping us up level the organization as a whole, as opposed to somebody who, I go to when there's an HR issue. And he's so proactive. I would say if you don't have a great HR partner that you turn to as one of your most strategic confidants in how you run your business, then you're missing out. Like I lean on this guy for almost everything I do. Like I talk to him on almost every single day for like an hour a day. And he's absolutely incredible.
That's awesome. Okay. I'm just catching up on all these questions. Please keep them coming. Let's see. There was one more, which is, okay, here we go. Managing a team at a really early stage company versus managing a team at a large company. Is it different? Like if you were to go back and become the CPO of TapJoy again, would you take everything that you learned at AppD and apply it there, or do you have to sort of change what you do a bit?
I would definitely, there's a lot I would take from what I learned at AppD and bring it back to TapJoy. One of the things that I think I was lacking at that stage of my career, when we were growing up as an organization, it's easy for a startup when you have like one functional area that's sort of like your strength. And many times it's engineering or product or sales. Your whole company is led by that. It becomes like your own company's North Star. And what I was lacking when I was at TapJoy that I find a lot more importance in now is the need to understand how every different function plays a key piece in how you succeed. and being able to build empathy between different teams and understand how each team plays their part and how do you leverage them effectively and how do you build that understanding so people can partner, is something that has taken me years to learn, partially because you have to truly understand what everyone does and how they bring value to the table. But two, then you have to help explain it to all these functional groups that speak these like very nuanced but separate languages. And when I was at TapJoy, I was like 100%, like blinders on, product. And, once you've had the experiences that I've had, you realize you can't win if all you have is product. Like you have to have an amazing go-to-market. You have to have amazing comms, amazing design, amazing engineering, amazing quality, amazing team culture, like the organization and your people, really healthy finances. Like you realize the value of every function. And once you do that, you can be so much more successful. And so that's something I would definitely bring, back to my experience at TapJoy if I could sort of rewind the clock. The one thing that I think is really important to remember, though, between small and large teams is when you're still a small team, and you're, I bet almost everyone on this call is probably thinking to themselves, I don't have all those resources. I don't have all the budget or the headcount. Like I have one person that does like 10 jobs. That's the reality of life. Like you almost never have enough resources. I've never been at a company where I thought to myself, man, I have so much money. I don't know what to do with it. Like, gosh, I can't hire any more headcount. And so the key is to always remember sort of what is the healthy amount of investment and what are the most important things you need to get done, and then make sure that you have people in the right place to drive the most important initiatives forward. And so in a smaller team, many times you've got, PM is the janitor of your business. They do anything and everything that no one else does. When I was a PM at Nextbit, I also emptied the dishwasher in our office. But it's one of those things where understanding the roles that individuals play and that those roles become more and more defined the bigger you get is an important realization to have.
Okay, dovetailing into that question, Deborah asks, when you are in the scale up phase, you've got lots of strategic questions around the business, but you also need to execute really well, right? How do you balance those two things?
It's like impossible. There's no such thing as like a smooth balance where you sort of like cruise these things upward together, right? There are always trade-offs. Every company I've been at has been at a point where they reach a certain level of scale and growth that they're like, crap, I need to re-platform. My underlying infrastructure can't handle this kind of scale, or we have all this tech debt, or hey, we have to change up, the brand and the experience, or we want to rewrite the UI, or whatever it is, right? You've always got these things that you need to do that continually iterate your ability to grow your underlying business while you're actually growing the top line revenue. And the key is to know that it's a balance and know that you're going to constantly be making these trade-offs. And you have to ask yourself, when you make those trade-offs, what are the right ones to make right now? And which are the ones that you can wait a little bit longer? And the key is to never wait too long. And a lot of times I look forward and I ask myself, if I'm still here in 3 years, am I going to deeply regret this decision by not making this decision right now? The best way I think about it is like, if any of you like driving on the 101 in California and you drive north to south, at different points in time, you're accelerating and you're cruising, and then you're slowing down, you run into traffic, you go really, really fast when you pass Cowtown. Like there are different points where you start and stop. And that's what growing your business is. There are points where you're going fast, points where you have to slow down, points where you run into traffic jams, and it's okay. But like knowing that you're not looking for a constant steady pace the entire ride is an important reality. And then the other part of it is making sure that as you make those decisions to slow down or speed up or come to a stop, you're making the right trade-offs in those moments.
Okay, awesome. Okay, here's one from submissions before the event. What's the best way to create a learning culture?
My favorite question to ask people is when they bring you a solution, ask them for another one. It's super easy to solve a problem. Like you present a problem to a team and they'll solve a problem. You present another problem to the team, they'll solve it the same way. People get stuck in single like mindsets of how they approach problems. It's natural. But if you then say, okay, great, thanks for solution one, think about another way to solve it. Could you solve it this way? Or could you solve it another way by taking these factors out or adding a new factor in? But when you start to ask questions like that and you challenge people to think just a little differently, it's amazing. It's amazing what they come up with. And as much as you can push people to think differently, the more you'll find that their natural direction will be to always think differently and to always consider other outcomes. And from there, find some desire to learn and grow. But like that's my small like sneaky trick. It's always like ask for a second solution. The other thing to do is just to make sure that you don't like expect a learning culture and fail to invest in it, right? Like learning culture requires you giving people space to learn, being able to read or take courses or get coaching or go to conferences, whatever it is. Like there's so many different mechanisms you can go to learn more or get information or to just challenge yourself to think differently, during the day. If you don't allocate that kind of time or space for your team, then you can't expect them to grow. So it's an investment and it's a way of shifting people's thinking.
That's awesome. Okay. Josh asks a question. As you hire a lot of people during hypergrowth, having empowered and delegated teams is crucial. How do you empower a team? What does it mean to empower a team?
I will say this is probably one of the hardest things I've had to deal with as a leader, because I am one of those people that is like, I don't turn off. I think about work all the time. And so when you empower a team or when you delegate work to them, you have to trust the team. And part of trusting the team is like not getting in their business about it every single time and asking them for an update and ask them like what's going on. You have to, work with them, set expectations around what does success look like, but step back when it comes to the approach. If you start to talk about the how, then you've completely undermined any of the empowerment that you're trying to do. And I have been notoriously bad at that. And so I've been like, I have to constantly remind myself, like if I ask someone to do something and we've defined what success looks like, I then need to go hide in a corner and like lock myself away and shut off and like prevent myself from bothering them. And that's just like patience on my end, more than anything else. But, if you're hiring amazing people, right? If you're hiring great talent, the worst thing you can do is shut off that talent and smother it. And so like it's so critical to not only surround yourself with this great talent and trust them, but like truly empower them when you give them, key missions and projects and initiatives to go run after. And that's something that it's a challenge every day, but it's something that like I'm constantly reminding myself to just like back the F off and let my team go do their job.
It's so hard. I think that transition, I mean, for myself, just like you, it is so difficult to because you've done it. It's like there's my wife and I laugh about, there's this comic about group projects. Remember doing those group projects in high school? Mm-hmm. And it's on somebody's tombstone, and it says, I invited all the people I ever worked on group projects with to lower me into the ground so they could let me down one last time.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I mean, that's like exactly, I was that kid in high school. I was the kid that I just did the group project, right? Like, and I was so angry because I did it all myself, but it's kind of my fault. Like, I needed to learn how to like work with others and delegate better, but it's one of those parts of life where trusting other people is like one of the hardest things to do.
Totally. Okay, this question's come up 4 times now. Do you have a recommended framework to think about process scaling?
Oh,
do you
man.
have like a management framework for like, okay, I'm at 100 employees. These are the 3 most important things. Now I'm at 500 employees. These are the most important things.
I'm not like a, scientific, like detail-oriented person when it comes to process scaling, but I think about it as a constantly iterative process itself, right? Like, when I was starting out my career, the idea of process was just like this thing that I had an allergic reaction to. Like process to me was like basically overhead. It was things that slowed you down. And then as I started to understand the value of it, I realized, no. Process is actually the underlying sort of infrastructure of how your business then can like execute and build upon itself by setting these norms. And that process changes as your company continues to grow. And the key is to be able to recognize it before it breaks, like when you get to these inflection points. And, you'll set something in place and it'll work for the moment that you're in. So I'll give you a really silly example. But like we used to have this ritual at TapJoy when we first started out. Every time we launched a new customer, we would blow a vuvuzela out the window, and then we would go out for lunch. And we'd go out for lunch
You
together.
would blow an azealia out the window?
A vuvuzela. So if anyone went to South Africa,
From the World Cup.
vuvuzelas or whatever.
Yep.
So we would like celebrate it, right? And then we would go out to lunch, and we'd all like someone would pick a restaurant, we'd all go sit down and eat lunch, and it worked great because we were like 7 people. Then we grew to 12 people, and like we could no longer fit at the same restaurant. And so we had to change our process, right? It's a silly process, but it was like this ritual that we had, and we had to change it because we could not fit at the same restaurant. So then we started ordering from a restaurant. We just eat in the office because no one could seat us. And then we started hiring people who were gluten intolerant, or people who didn't eat meat, or people who had very certain preferences. And we had to keep changing these rituals that we had, because as we scaled, certain things no longer made sense. And as long as you remember what it is that you're trying to accomplish with that process, we were trying to, 1, make sure people were fed, but 2, like celebrate these moments. You need to like recognize when you're no longer able to accomplish what you're trying to do with the process, because now you've reached a level of scale or dynamic, you've changed to the point where that process now needs to iterate. And so for a lot of you, you're probably thinking about like the processes of how you launch products, or how you work together, or how you like market things, or how what's your go-to-market or sales motions. But like these processes are things that they make sense for the moment you're in. And when you find that the effort to execute them suddenly outweighs the value that you get from them, then you sit down and you reiterate, redesign them. Think about how you might change them to solve the same problem that you're solving before. And so I would say, from process scaling, think about it that way. At an organizational level, I would say the one thing to think about as you're scaling your business, and you start to think about, what are the new functions you need to bring in? What are the things that like you should be thinking about when you grow to so many people? I would say 1, like find executive coaches or find mentors who are operators, like senior level operators. Because when you get to certain levels of scale, certain things become so much more critical that you never thought about before, or the risk becomes so much higher. So how you think about legal, HR, finance, core operations, procurement, that stuff gets really complex when you can no longer sort of like manage it, with like a single person in a back office, or, you start to prepare for things like going public and you have to think about SOX compliance. So when you get to those levels, right, when you start to break, certain amounts of, I would say when you start to break into the, tens to hundreds of millions of revenue, and you actually start to get to, more than just, a core set of functions, like when you start to actually think about more formal finance, legal, like accounting and operations, like get a coach or get like a mentor or some sort of, operating like consultancy to help you just think through some of these changes, because it'll vary a lot across every organization. There's no like fixed method, but it is something that like, if you're reactive to it, like if you wait till something breaks and you deal with it, that gets really painful, especially with regards to things like security.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we got a question that's been upvoted 3 times from Prabhat. When you inherit a big team as a leader, and you've done this a couple times, how do you get started? How do you set your goals and track them for, say, the first 3 months?
Yeah. So inheriting a team is really, really challenging, right? Like it's super easy to build a team up yourself and like pick the people you want and do all that. When you inherit a team, you don't just like, you can't just go in there, like wipe it out and like reset. Like you've got these amazing people, and what you need to do is build relationships with everyone. And so whenever I take over a new team, I sit down and I meet all the leaders. I meet their directs. I get to know the organization, and I observe, right? Because chances are, if you're not there, they can keep running without you. And the key is to understand what's the baseline. How's the team doing? How are things running? What's going on? What works well? What doesn't go well? Do a listening tour. Once you've done that, and you can understand what's going well, what's not, and you can get a perspective on your team and your leaders and what they might need, you can start to build a plan. And when you start to build a plan with that team, be transparent, be open about what you think is working and what's not, and iterate on what the right goal should be for that team, and keep it really, really simple. Like narrow it down to like 3 goals maximum. More than that, you're not going to get anything done. And so anytime I go into a team, I really focus on just getting to know the landscape and baselining it, and then figuring out what is a meaningful sort of goal that we could achieve in what period of time over a 30, 60, or 90-day window, and how do we want to get there, and then work with the team to put it in place. One thing I would say, if you are inheriting a team because you're either taking on a new role or going to a new company, one of the best books I've ever read is The First 90 Days. It's like my favorite thing to read anytime I take on a new role or a new company. Actually, the HR leader at Nextbit gave it to me when I left to go to the NFL, and I've been rereading that copy like every single time I've taken on a new role. But it's a great reminder of how do you like step back for a moment and evaluate a situation with fresh eyes.
Awesome. Well, we're 10 minutes over already, Linda. I want to thank you so much for you coming onto the show. We're really appreciative, and really want to thank the audience for all of the terrific engagement. It's been fascinating, and like I said, it's very rare to find somebody who's got such a breadth of experience and really values building teams the way that you do and the culture, and it's wonderful to hear from you. So thank you so much. Big round of applause, virtual applause for Linda.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me.
So Linda, one of the things that we can do with AirMeet, if you have the time, is there's those virtual tables. I don't know if you have a few minutes afterwards, and if you do, sure. Then for those of you that would want to maybe speak with Linda directly, ask questions, like we jump off of stage in those crazy times when we had real life conferences and things, we do something here with AirMeet. So we'll send a chat out to the table that Linda ends up in, and then you have the ability to jump into that in the virtual networking. So thanks for doing that. Just a couple quick housekeeping reminders before we adjourn. Ashley will post a feedback form. We're always trying to get better at this event, and also ideas for subsequent office hours as we start planning out 2021. So please take a couple of minutes and give us some candid feedback on the program. There's also a sign-up link for our next office hours. We're smashing 2 in before we shut down for the winter holidays. And so we're really excited to have GC Leonetti, who ran growth at Dropbox and is the CMO of Confluent, talking about product-led growth as the new buzzword, 3-letter acronym that everyone is really keen on building out. So Pat Chase, one of the principals in our early stage team, and myself will have a chat with him, and that's Wednesday, December 16th at 9 a.m. Pacific. So the registration link is there. As I said, we'll be sharing some of the learnings from this through Tomasz's blog, and so that will be posted shortly. And again, Linda, just an incredible amount. I wish that I would have known you when I had a reasonably large team from all the things that you shared. So thanks so much for all your candor and vulnerability. Really, really great session.
Totally. Well, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
You're the best, Linda. We're going to have to ask you back. This was awesome.
Happy to. Anytime.
Okay. Right. Be safe, everyone. Happy holidays.